All right, good afternoon. I think letting people joining in now. Just give everyone a few minutes to join in. Great, nice to see many of you. You can see with these Zoom events as people are dialing in. So great to see many of you. I know, and some of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. Fantastic. So what we might do, attendees and panelists, is give this just a couple of minutes, because people are sort of streaming in at the moment. I think it's just on time now, just on 4 o'clock. Yep, keep more and more people coming in, which is great. I'm dialing in from Melbourne today. How's Auckland? Oh, it's looking, Paul, the sun looks like it's out, is it? I presume you're at the office on the waterfront, are you?
Yeah, it's not a bad afternoon here in Auckland, so pretty good. Got the windows open, actually. It's quite warm.
Wow. All right, we'll give it. My watch says 4:01. Let's give it two more minutes. At 4:03, we'll start. Still a few people. I see still a few people dialing in. So while you're waiting, attendees, first of all, thank you all for joining us today. This is the second in our Global B2B Insights series, where we really want to just talk about different topics that relate to global trade, particularly, I guess, B2B trade. But many of these issues will also, or challenges and solutions will also apply if you are acting more in a sort of consumer type trade. Yeah, I guess when we think about global B2B insights, that's B2B stands for business to business. We launched this series as a sort of informal part of our Alibaba.com launch in New Zealand, which we did in the second half of last year. Alibaba.com being the world's largest digital B2B marketplace. But I'm not here on behalf of Alibaba.com. I'm here really just to facilitate the discussion with our great panelists. So I think we've now got a good number of people, and I think we can start. So what I might do, I think you've all hopefully seen the welcome page. So the subject of today's topic is B2B trade enablers, digital solutions to streamline the global trade experience. We're going to keep this as quite an open discussion. Really encourage you to put any questions in the Q&A. Please use the Q&A. There is a chat as well, but it's going to be easier for us to manage as the Q&A. We'll go through some questions for the panel. I may bring some of them into the discussion. If you want to leave them during the discussion, that's fine, or wait till the end when we're doing the Q&A. We've got a really interesting group of panelists here, and I think you can see from the range of expertise, and they're going to introduce themselves, that they know a lot about trade. And this is really about how digitalization, quite broadly defined, can facilitate you, in what is a very challenging trade environment. Fortunately, still from a New Zealand macro perspective, we're doing great, but it's certainly not without its challenges. The great thing is there are lots of solutions to help you, and maybe to think about trade differently. So hopefully you'll come away from today with some ideas, maybe ways of thinking about how digital tools can apply to your business, and maybe even some of the solutions that our partners or our panelists today work with will be relevant to you. But even if not, hopefully you'll come away with some great ideas. So that's enough from me. So I would like to hand over to Adrian from TradeWindow. TradeWindow are our hosts today. They've really been super helpful in putting this together and organizing this. So we really thank TradeWindow. They're a business that we are certainly working on a number of potential projects with. And it's really exciting what TradeWindow are doing, not just in New Zealand clearly, but also globally. So Adrian, maybe over to you. I'll stop sharing so we can see everyone, and maybe give a brief introduction.
Thanks very much, Pier. It's great to be here today, and it's fantastic to be partnering with Alibaba in a webinar like this in a subject area that's really close to our heart. It's kind of right in the focus area for TradeWindow around digitizing trade and making that hopefully easier than it is now, and it's pretty difficult now. My name's Adrian Collier. I'm the Chief Product and Supply Chain Officer at TradeWindow. That effectively means that my team and I would try and figure out what to build in terms of software solutions for our customers. And there are lots and lots and lots of different things to work on. And we take a strong cue and a strong lead from our customers about where we focus and where we spend our time and money. We're fair to say that there are lots of interesting and somewhat confounding problems in global trade. But working at TradeWindow and with partners like Alibaba and ASB Bank and others, we really are pushing the boundary on what can be done digitally.
Great, thank you. And maybe Alvin, do you want to give a brief introduction as well?
Sure, thank you, Pier. It's a pleasure to be invited to this webinar, and very nice to meet everyone here this afternoon. And my name is Alvin, and I run a company called Sky Distribution, an Auckland-based company. And Sky has been working with many New Zealand brands and suppliers to help them to get access to China market throughout general trading and cross-border e-commerce since 2014. So in these years, working in this export field, and we have developed knowledge and built up the team to look after e-commerce operations and the supply chain, whole supply chain solutions, and the marketing execution, including the budget and execution, and as well as establish the strong relationship with the major e-commerce platform, such as Alibaba, Tmall, and the Taobao Globals. So another role for me today is we are the New Zealand country partner of Alibaba.com, which is a dedicated B2B marketplace for export globally, including New Zealand exports. So yeah, we're working more like field agents in a very practical business environment, dealing with the real opportunity and the challenges in the export. So it's especially throughout e-commerce. So this is a big part of, I think, this big part of digital solutions and in the total supply chain. So I would like to, participate and share some experience and answer the questions for today's session.
Great, thanks, Alvin. And last but certainly not least, Paul. We were doing this by alphabetical order, so A comes before P. But over to you, Paul.
Kia ora talofa, good afternoon. As mentioned here, Paul Gestro with ASB. I'm an international trade consultant here at ASB. What does that mean? Well, firstly, it means I'm not a banker, so don't ask me questions about current currency rates, etc., and some banking product. I can't give that. Although as exporters, the drop in exporters on the line, the drop in the exchange rate's pretty good, but probably opposite for everyone else on the line who's possibly an importer. So what does it do? Obviously we have trade and trade finance and foreign exchange products. We're a bank. We have all those kind of things. But a big focus for us is around guidance and advice, and that's really supporting exporters in their export growth and helping them grow. We've been very busy in that space. We like to sort of wrap around a whole bunch of non-bank services to our trade business. I've worked in international business for a very long time. Say 35 years, that sounds really long because I did an export business in my teens. So don't try and calculate back from that, please. Had 10 years at NZTE and worked mostly in Asia and over in North America. So I saw hundreds and hundreds of companies come through those markets, seen plenty that have done it right and plenty more that have done it wrong. So yeah, good sort of background. Digital now is becoming very, very important. Digital trade is something we're really focusing in on. There's a lot of work to do from a global perspective and a New Zealand perspective on getting our rules and regulations right. We may talk about that a little bit later. And we're so interested in digital trade. We invested in a company called TradeWindow 3 years ago. And we're still the largest investor in that business. So we're really putting literally our money where our mouth is. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Now, I warned the panelists that I was going to do this, so I'm going to go slightly off script because, Paul, you raised a really interesting point that I just want to follow up on. In your various roles with NZT and so on, you said you've worked with hundreds of businesses. What's your overall, the current challenges that exporters are facing with, well, you just talked about all these variable exchange rates, sanctions in certain markets, supply chain, obviously COVID lockdowns. Is this one of the tougher times you've experienced working with customers? How does this relate?
Yeah, well, I said 30 odd years in international business, and big number of that working directly with exporters in particular. And I thought I got a new lot, but the last couple of years, I thought I'd seen it all, but the last couple of years it's just tipped it on its head, like we all know. So the challenges you mentioned, we could just keep writing a longer list. There's that, what you mentioned. There's plenty of other things that are going on. Obviously, from our side, we see a lot around working capital as the main issue and main discussion points. And that just all backs into all the other issues around supply chain and other costs to the business, which I'm sure we'll cover.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on mute. I need to just I'm in a quiet room. I can keep my mute off. It's probably a better idea. Right, so let's get back to the topic. So when I was thinking about this, I thought there are lots of challenges to trade at the moment, and please feel free to raise any questions you guys have, because as I said, we've got a great panelists here today. But more coincidentally, they start with C. So the three areas I thought we could frame the discussion around today. The first is cost and compliance. So we all know costs are rising. Some of them are beyond the scope of this panel, but how can some of the digital tools help you with that? And the other is compliance. There is increasing compliance. Obviously, we had all the safety regulations and travel restrictions around COVID, but there's increasing data requirements. There are different cross-border taxes coming through. Customs documentation is changing, etc. So and biosecurity. So there's a lot of different compliance coming. So the panelists, their thoughts on how digitization can help in that. The second is the idea of collaboration. Now, collaboration is obviously is massively important, but I think it's becoming even more important. And we see this today, in different ways. All of us here as the panelists and me as the moderator, collaborate with everyone here as well in different ways. And I think that collaboration across the supply chain is becoming more and more important, and digitization, certainly can make that easier and more efficient. So it'd be great. I'm going to ask a little bit about that. And the final thing is customers. Probably for any business, the most important part really is our customers. And in the last 2 years, that's been bloody difficult. And it's, of course, you could put colleagues in there as well, but let's stay on customers. We haven't been able to see our customers for the large part. Now there's probably this wave of revenge travel, but if any of you are traveling at the moment like I am, it's ridiculously expensive, and seems like everyone's losing their suitcases. So try to travel with hand luggage only would be my tip. But what are the challenges? It's a tougher economic climate, and finding and retaining customers, and how can digitization help with that? So going with that, maybe let's start with this cost and compliance issue. Adrian, do you want to have a bit of a thought about how you see that and how you guys help companies find solutions to those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just stick with the cost and compliance to begin with. But there's no question that operating a business today is just more expensive than operating it historically. You can see that when you go to the grocery store yourself. And a lot of the cost increase that we see reverberates back through the supply chain. So people are paying more pretty much for everything, whether it's transport, whether it's fuel, whether it's containers, all those sorts of things. And trying to orchestrate trade internationally is not only complex, but as you say, is getting more expensive. So you need to be able to do that efficiently and effectively in order to be able to manage those costs. Otherwise, they can get on top of you pretty quickly. So it's kind of from an efficiency point of view, and digitization helps organizations be more efficient. Of course, there's always work in other areas, and that's where you want your colleagues and your staff and your team to be focusing in higher value areas and try and routinize and digitize some of the more menial tasks, if I can say that. Digitization helps show exceptions. If you've got an export clearance that's failed for a container that you've got on the wharf, you need to know that, particularly if it's perishable, for example. Otherwise, that's sitting there, and you might be writing off a lot of stock. And in this environment, in fact, any environment, that's not where you want to be. So, digitization helps with efficiency. It helps with effectiveness, and we're seeing a rise in compliance requirements globally, whether that's ESG type requirements, or whether it's even something more typical, but in some ways unwanted. In a particular jurisdiction I can think of, there's now a requirement for agricultural exporters to fill in another form. And so from that country, they're like, well, it's just one more form, what does it really matter? But from an exporter's point of view, that's a real impact to the way their workflow operates today. And so you've got to have your process and information around process in good shape, and I would argue well digitized, in order to be able to react to changing compliance requirements, and then work with your providers, whether it's internal or external, to try and use that data to satisfy them in the most efficient way you can.
Great, thank you. No, that's really interesting, and I think your point about efficiency is really well taken. One of the things, certainly we see this across our businesses, and I presume it's the same for you guys. The other one thing with digitization, and this is often I found a challenge to adoption, is sometimes those efficiencies in the beginning, actually, often digitization, it takes time to set things up, right? Whether it's a new system you're implementing, whether you're joining Alibaba.com, whether you're probably switching, Paul, to a different trade finance provider and it's digitized, there is always setup, but the real payback, comes when you have these systems and tools in place. So often the hurdle for businesses in digitizing is getting past that kind of first gate, right, of getting your teams into that mindset, and then you really start seeing the efficiencies flow. So that's also, I think, why in any digitization process, whatever it is, partner selection is so important, because you need people who can support you, especially if you're a business that is starting a digital journey for the first time. Partner selection is really important, and whether it's with us or some of the companies here, just make sure you choose the right people to work with that you can have a good relationship with. So Alvin, over to you on that one. For you, I'm thinking probably rather than compliance, we could probably help a lot with, or you can probably help a lot with the cost part when you think about Alibaba.com and how that helps digital transformation. What are your thoughts?
Yes, well, when we talk about the cost and to go into digital, it's not only the things with the digital tools we've been using to help us with trade. It's actually the mindset, the whole process, and just like you mentioned. And initially, the cost is just not the fundings and the tools we've been using. It's actually the total the supply chains dot to dot and how we incorporate with that. So in the real experience, when we run actually B2B and the help clients on the B2B platform, we found that so initially when people actually started getting to the e-commerce, especially B2B e-commerce, and they think that could be easier. It could be easier, make things easier. The digital solution actually provide an easier solution for them. But however, it's actually not an easier the pathway to them. It's actually being more accessible, more flexible, and more transparent. So with all total those attributes come together, and ultimately it become a bit approachable and a bit easier throughout time. So we still need to think about, and when initially we started these digital journeys, we probably just said some digital tools we've been using. However, throughout time, we will discover that there's more and more concept, and especially the things we need to actually transform, digitally in our mindset. So that's the cost of digital transformation. So that's the initial cost. we need
But
to
it
actually
saves,
think about.
but it also will save costs down the line, right? Because you don't have to travel, you don't have to do lots of things that might have been costs before.
Yeah, absolutely. So digital provide a lot of kind of and approaches and alternatives, and to compare with our traditional approaches. But the initial learning curves and the learning process will still actually need to go with that. So that's why I said digitalization is going to reduce and help with and the cost, aspect. However, and we need to actually understand that there's a process of being, digital and getting to the transformations and get used to the concept of using these digital solutions. Yeah. And then not only the tools we've been using, and also the mindset. Yeah, no, I really like that point about the mindset, because, and the other thing there is to think about when you think about digitalization. Is going to reap huge benefits for organizations in so many areas. But the other issue is your partners are going to start expecting it. They're going to start expecting that kind of data sharing. It's things like what we've noticed with Alibaba.com that once you get onto this global marketplace, that customers overseas are expecting replies to inquiries within 24 hours, whereas maybe previously some of these exporters might have been taking a few days, or even longer. But exporting is by definition playing on a global playing field, right? Because your customers are overseas. So it's being part of the global game now. I do think in many areas does require digitization. It's great to see so much innovation coming out of New Zealand. So Paul, what about you? What about when you think about companies undergoing to the digital journey for exporters and the benefits to them?
Yeah, there's no doubt about, there's been such heightened costs recently, and Adrian sort of gave a good description of many of them that we're seeing. What surprised me though is many of these hidden costs, and a lot of those hidden costs have come down to the reliability of shipping, or the unreliability of shipping. So the supply chain disruption. Every customer I go to, the very first topic is around export customers around supply chain issues. So it's obviously the same thing, heightened costs that have gone through the roof. But because of the disruptions and because of the unreliability of shipping, there's been so many new hidden costs added to companies, and they just come out of the blue. And on top of that, there's all these delays mean you're warehousing more, you're transporting more to and back because you send it to the port and it has to come back again, or has to be warehoused somewhere. So there's just cost after cost after cost after cost. So it's a real issue. And each of those costs comes with more documents and more documentation. We're just swamped in it. So the digital solution is necessary, and we're seeing quite a bit of that in some logistics space and supply chain space, which has been great. What we've done is, obviously, because we're bankers, focused a bit more on the financing thing and just try to speed up that process of the documentation. We implemented a new trade platform a year or so ago now, and that's created great new efficiencies for handling documents and getting things happening a lot faster, of course. But that's not easy. It's someone talked about an investment before, and it's a big investment and it takes a long time to bed in, especially linking into legacy banking systems, etc. But on that, we've been able to do things like with the delays in shipping and needing more working capital because you're getting paid later or whatever, or you're importing and doing the same. We've got systems in place now where you can click a box and create a very short-term finance loan just to cover you for that period or extra period of cost. And that's been really good because it's done in the background. You don't have to call up your broker to get an FX rate and choose an FX rate. You don't have to create a loan document. You don't have to create new supporting documents, etc., etc. So just speeding up that efficiency, making that loan approval process, especially for short-term finance, a lot quicker. So you can get over some of those cash flow hurdles that we're all encountering because of delays in shipping. So a lot of it's come back to that shipping delay again and issues around the world.
I'm guessing, and again, you're not a banker, but you obviously work with many bankers as your colleagues. The other thing, of course, is digitization generally means more data, which I presume makes it easier for a bank to make a financing decision, right? Because you have that it's quicker as well. to make a financing decision if the information is already there in a platform, whether it's TradeWindow, whether it's your own systems. You can access export documentations, contracts, whatever you might need to make sure that trade can be securitized, right?
Yeah, and it's a good segue into compliance, because the issue we're facing now is, yeah, data's great and getting more data, but we often need more data because new compliance and new regulations and new rules come through. So, hey, now we need a bit more data or a bit more data. So the challenge is there, and it's right in Adrian's book, is that, why replicate all that data all the time, and why replicate the information you're including when it can sit on blockchain, for example, and it can be verified all the way through. You're not having to repeat all the time. So yeah, it's the compliance factor is just needing more data. But at the end of the day, yes, the more data we have, the quicker decisions can be made. But of course, that all needs to be done digitally to make that happen. So, we're scouring. We can't develop it ourselves, so we're looking deep into the fintech space, third-party providers to provide that for us. And so that's a very active piece of work that's been done.
Well, and that's great, because that brings us to the next topic, which Adrian, is collaboration. So, one of the advantages of a secure platform like TradeWindow provides is that the people your customers, the exporters, in the case of today's example, can share that with other people. Is that how that works? They can give access to maybe the bank or the importers on the other end, and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. And just want to pick up on a comment Alvin made, and perhaps Paul touched on as well, that digitization allows you to scale, right, and in a non-linear fashion. And I think that's, I think Paul mentioned that he's seen hundreds and hundreds of exporters on their growth journey. And there are, some characteristics of organizations that grow well, and there are characteristics of organizations that don't grow so well. And so from a New Zealand perspective, of course, we want all our exporters to grow. And, there are lots and lots and lots of organizations around New Zealand, TradeWindow and ASB and others as examples of that are right in behind export growth. But it's a rate limiting step if you're operating an analog organization in order to grow at the rates that most businesses do. If you really haven't got control of your data, you haven't got control of the way that you're operating internally, then that will slow you down. And so you really need to get ahead of that. I think that's where Alvin was heading as well, is that sure, there is a hump at the middle, no question. Any change to the way of working is it's not free in terms of effort, but the payback is in the relative short term, and it also puts you in a good position for the future as well. I also saw a question come through about how to control the flow of data across borders, and I think that links into the collaboration piece. Traditionally, collaboration across borders is based on trust between parties, and that's how trade happens today as well. Generally speaking, you don't trade with people you don't trust. We certainly put measures in place to mitigate risk. And so what we try and do is, instead of me having to trust an importer in Indonesia, for example, we're trying to move to a position where we can trust a process more. And that's why we use technologies like blockchain and others, so that we can prove where data's come from, and we can prove the authenticity of documents, we'll say. And that's so that you can have more trust in the process, and you'll be able to dial down a little bit, perhaps, the trust that you have to have in your partner overseas. And so that type of collaboration based on trust of a process means that you typically will have a larger group of customers that you can sell to, because overall you can sell to organizations that you may not have previously. In terms of collaboration, yeah, data is the new oil, right? And partners overseas, yes, that they want to see documentation, for example, in good order. What we're seeing more and more is that partner organizations, whether that's brokers, freight forwarders, banks, insurance companies, importers, whatever you like, more and more they're asking for can you send that to me in a data file so I can import it into my system? Or can you call our API so that we can get that into our system so we don't have to rekey it, so that it's efficient on our end as well. So it's not just, I mean, New Zealand exporters do a fantastic job of getting the stock on the ship in good shape and high quality product. And now we're trying to push that efficiency right through by allowing New Zealand exporters to get that data to the end as well, so that their importers can be efficient. And so collaboration is exactly that. It's about people supporting each other to achieve the required outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I think collaboration is it is so important in all aspects of business, and as you said, in digital tools just make that collaboration easier. Alvin, I mean, that's probably a good one for you. I mean, one of the real advantages that we're seeing with customers who use Alibaba.com, as a global B2B marketplace, is the digital tools they can use to collaborate and share information. Talk a little bit about how digitization helps that cross-border collaboration communication, I guess, from your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And the collaboration is so critical and between parties to facilitate the trade. And within Alibaba.com B2B, the first thing is, how do we share the data? Because the data is extremely important. So when we actually open a new market, or think about it to getting access to a new market without product, the first questions we're going to ask whether there's a demand there. So how do we define that? So Alibaba.com is more than 20 years in the e-commerce platform marketplace. There's a 40 million active buyers in a daily basis. It's a large amount of traffic throughout the platform. So within that base, we build up sort of kind of data center, and which can help the exporters, global exporters, including New Zealanders, to understand the demand, understand the product trends. So it built up sort of kind of capabilities and to do the demand predictions, and also give very detailed like hot search keywords. So in which regions, demographic and geographical, which regions, and how can we actually interpret the data from the platform. So also the data will be presented in a secure way to our clients. So that's the first things we're going to collaborate with the data. And the second is the communications. And because in the e-commerce, and you don't know actually the other parties sitting in the other region, other countries. How do we actually build up the trust is also critical. And in the traditional ways, we normally shake hand and travel to meet our clients, or somebody actually refer us to another potential client. However, in the e-commerce, it happens so quickly. You type in the products in the search bar, and it comes with the result, and the click, you get through to the stores. And then you look at the store and you look at where this supply is, and what's the background, what's the story, and what's the capabilities. Then we get into the the communications. So everything's become fast-paced, and back to the aspect I initially mentioned, that it also require us to communication back to the buyers in the other end, and in a fast pace. So it's two-way. So it definitely going to help. So digitalizations and the e-commerce definitely going to help with the trade. However, it will require us to actually learn and adapt this new technology and new changes.
No, that makes sense. And collaboration, it's new tools for collaboration. So Paul, when you think about that broad topic of collaboration in trade and digitization, any observations or there?
Yeah, look, in general, I think it's accelerated in the last couple of years, and that's because it's been forced upon us. So that's a positive in some respects.
Yeah.
Getting companies to collaborate isn't easy at the best of times, but it's quite amazing when there's a bit of stress in the markets that companies decide that it's a good idea to collaborate. So that's great, and we do a big part of that. I'm sure many of you do, is to try and connect the dots and connect people up. And we've seen a lot of that with sharing containers to go offshore. You've got some space because getting hold of containers very, very, very difficult. So if you've got some space, you sort of tell your mates and try and fill it up, kind of thing, in a small scale. But sharing, you know, that and the sharing of data is always a tricky one. If you go back to your data conversation, you know, and getting the rights and the ability to share data, and the rules can be different in different countries as well. So yeah, it can be a very, very tricky road to walk on. But in general, seeing a lot more collaboration. I can't think of any examples where there's a digital tech collaboration, but in fact, actually, there is an example, Adrian. You know, we're looking at integrating our platform into TradeWindow to make it more seamless as well. So, you know, that is sharing data and sharing the right data, and you know, obviously the data that's required to enable that. So that just makes the customer experience a lot more easier, a lot more seamless.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the other thing, I guess, is Adrian, your platforms are also, we get back to compliance, but that's with collaboration, I guess. They're also compliant. If you're operating in a market, they're compliant with the rules that apply in that country, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that makes trade so complicated, is that every jurisdiction's got its own rules. Yeah. And so you're right, across TradeWindow, we have an application that helps with export documentation, and it will send messages to customs and MPI and all those sorts of regulators domestically in order to lodge export requirements. And so these are different in every market that we work with. And yeah, over time, we focus on our priority markets in terms of where we spend our time and effort. But it's that collaboration is important, and I think Paul hit the nail on the head where it's sped up, and so it's very, very difficult to do that via email and have quick turnaround, and then monitor your inbox for 200 responses or across different containers, different geographies, all that sort of stuff. So to make sense of the data is hard, and I think that's where organisations that have digitized, that are seeing some initial gains in being able to collaborate and manage some of those compliance costs using their data effectively, reaching that point where it's a little bit overwhelming, and so you need a lot of insight and effort put in behind making sense of what is just an avalanche of information. So really, what we see is that, for example, out of the 12 events that we can get out of the Port of Auckland for a particular container, one stands out as, by far and away, customers want to know what that one event is, and that's whether customs have given an export clearance or not. If it hasn't got an export clearance, it's not going anywhere. And so to know that at seconds after customs have issued it is really important. And to know that in a distributed sense, so that as an individual I could see it, people on my team can see it, those sorts of things we can react, is really, really important.
And so in the past, how would that work? If it wasn't digitized, would they send you an email or?
Yeah, likely. It'll be that sort of communication.
Yeah.
But it's not. I mean, if you had one container, that's fine. But we deal with customers that have hundreds of containers going out at any point in time, and they just want to know, well, just show me the top 10 that haven't got this clearance, because I can deal with everything else, but I can't write off $200,000 per container every time it sits on the wharf for too long. Yeah. And so being able to do that can really help manage costs. It can help meet your compliance expectations, and it can help grow in a predictable way, a slightly more predictable way. Growth is never really predictable, but taking an element out that you have to worry about is really important.
Thank you, and you're making it really easy for me, gents, because you've given me the next topic where you talked about growth, and growth needs customers. So Alvin, I'm gonna get you to start on this one. How do digital tools help you grow, help a company grow their business from your experience?
Yeah, for example, within the Alibaba.com, the major task for us is actually to bring the customer to, potential customer to the client. And how do we do that? And in a digital environment, first we need to understand that it's an open digital environment, and our products and then our offerings is actually competed with the millions of other suppliers in the digital environment. So actually stand out, we actually need to understand the operations. And with this operation, we need to actually have a very clear strategy to guide those operations. For example, and if we're trying to actually penetrate to a new market, and we find and there's a date and talk about a demand over their market, then we have the right products toward that. And then the second is we actually need to put our products in front of those kind of buyers and at that regions. It's down to the operations. So how do we actually bring the more right and valid traffic throughout digital and the e-commerce marketplace and to our suppliers to actually start to get them to actually connect with each other and start communication? That's where actually trade started within Alibaba.com. So that's how we actually bring the more growth opportunities to our client in New Zealand here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other really cool, talking about digital tool, one of the ones that I love with Alibaba.com, which, as I've said, is like a trade show, but it's online, and people can approach you to reach out to you with an inquiry, is digitization actually lets you go the other way and find leads, because people who want to buy from all around the world can put in a request for a quotation. And that's something that wouldn't be possible without digitization. Effectively, a market. I think that's just one example where digitization doesn't just help you with the way you're currently doing business. So if you take Alibaba.com as an online trade show, and it works the same way, it just gets you more inquiries, but it creates whole new ways to create business. So, one of them with Alibaba.com is a buyer overseas can post an inquiry, say, I'm looking to buy, goat's milk powder or certain fat content or whatever it is, and I want this many containers of it. And people can actually go and search those and give a quotation. And it's all validated through digital tools, that there's digital trust attached. So I think that's really cool. Yeah, how digitization can actually give you whole new ways to grow your business. Paul, from your experience, even just in general or within what you see within ASB, digital tools allowing customers particularly from New Zealand, to grow their businesses.
Yeah, feedback from customers. I mean, one of the standouts has been probably reached more customers than ever before in the last couple of years, because the reliability of getting on a plane and going to a trade show or going to meet customers is great. You need that face-to-face, but because the businesses have been at risk being remote and not connected, obviously using digital tools to connect has actually enabled them to reach more customers than they ever thought. And also a bit more time in your hands. I've actually found through demand and seeing demand curves that they've re-engineered their products to have to suit the market, because customers are asking for different things than they did probably 2 or 3 years ago. So that's been kind of a big change that I've certainly seen. It's a lot more innovation happening from companies to reach customers. What stood out now, what's standing out now is the ability to use your digital tools to tell your story and tell your, and probably uniquely New Zealand story for exporters. And that's the conscious consumer around the world is asking a lot more about your product, right? You talked about goat milk, I think, a minute ago, but it's not just about the provenance side of which farm it came off, which is great, or which goat it came off, or whatever. It's now about what fertilizer is that farmer putting into their paddocks? What other inputs are going in there? Are they capturing carbon? Are they doing initiatives to plant more trees on the farm? All those kind of things are playing into it. So there has to be that visibility now of looking inward to where you're buying that product and where that product has been sourced, seeing exactly all these different metrics. And digitization is the only way you're going to do that. You're not just going to ring up the phone and ask those 10 questions of where the product's going. So we see it in supermarkets, the QR codes and stuff, but that's kind of just skims the surface. It's now totally reliant on a lot of other things through your supply chain and all the ESG components and climate change and some of those areas as well. So yeah, seeing that happening a lot more, and it's going to have to be the way of the future.
Well, and this gets back to I think Adrian, you said an avalanche of information or an avalanche of data, you know, and it's how you make sense of that. And I think, to Paul, to your point, you know, like we now have solutions from our Alibaba's cloud business where there's a lot of smart devices in manufacturing, you know, that measure your power inputs, your usage, and that can now be tracked, and that can also measure carbon up, and that's going to become more important, that people can talk probably to the government, to their partners overseas about their carbon emissions and so on, and you know, it's being able to track that. So yeah, it is there is only more data, unfortunately, that will be needed to be collected, and if you don't digitize, good luck trying to, you know, make anything useful out of that.
I'll just quickly add to that, if you don't mind, because
no, not at all.
Reminded me to talk about goat milk. I've now got an agri thing going on in my head. Yeah. We ran a backing business seminar, international trade series in Tauranga a few months ago, and we had MPI and Zespri and NZ Avocado on it, and they were talking about the theme of it was around biosecurity, but what the idea was to show that how important our biosecurity settings are to enable our export economy, because 50 billion, 80% of our primary 8% of our merchandise exports are from the primary sector. So at the moment, there's a threat of foot and mouth disease. It's in a few countries nearby. So if we don't get that right, and we get foot and mouth into New Zealand, it's going to cost us billions and billions of dollars to eradicate it. But now there's technology, and one of the other panelists was a technology provider that can actually track your movements on and off farms and on and off properties. So if there is any kind of outbreak through a truck or something, they've found something, you can quickly probably identify where that farm's come from and shut that farm down, but also shut maybe the area down, rather than shut the whole country down, because that's catastrophic, right? So a rolling COVID lockdown kind of scenario, but the technology is there on farm to track vehicle movements, people movements, and all those kind of things.
Yeah, and the tools exactly that you can quickly implement that, so that MPI or whoever can very quickly say, right, we know these are the areas that are, you know, that the technologies probably shows them some aggregated data, heat mapping, or, you know, whatever. You know, simple things like, Alibaba's main business is still e-commerce into China, with many Australian, New Zealand brands there. But, you know, one of the advantages of e-commerce, if it's a product, if let's say there is a product that needs a recall for whatever reason, with the e-commerce, it's very easy, because you can send a direct message to customers, and depending on how serious the recall is, you could probably actually call them, right? Because you've probably got that information of the customer, or reach them through an app. So, you know, there's so many benefits, and this is similar to what Paul said. This is from the consumer side, but you can track things to really improve safety and reduce the risk of having to do a full recall if you can identify a certain batch and who bought those products. But Adrian, I think over to you now, because this is probably a really good question for you. I think you've seen it, and this is, you know, I guess a question about ASEAN countries and the trust in helping governments. You know, I guess it's all well and good, right? If you guys and various other companies are producing all these digital tools, but how do you get governments to be willing to adopt them and not say, I don't know, send me a fax or whatever they maybe some countries still use?
You know, it is a fantastic question. It's a bit of a shame that's from anonymous attendee, because I'd like to have followed up about it. But anyway, look, the reality is that any government in any jurisdiction, it's up to them, and so you can't, you know, tell a government what to do. They, you know, don't react very well to that at all. So we try and do this in, you know, 2 or 3 different ways. You've got to meet governments where they are. So some jurisdictions are ahead, if you like, in the digital landscape. Singapore, for example, is probably leading the pack in Asia. Mainland China is there or thereabouts in terms of that leadership group. I would say that Australia and New Zealand are middle of the pack, and, you know, not making great strides at this point, but keeping up. And then 1 or 2 other countries that are making meaningful change as well. So the first thing is you can't pull governments. You've got to work with them largely on their time frame. Secondly, we create partnerships. And so we've got a partnership with MasterCard, for example, who are present in lots of different geographies. And so if we're talking about payments across borders, then we try and affect that change through organizations like that, because they bring an ecosystem to the table. So they've got their own partnerships in country, and I can give you an example where, for a large New Zealand exporter, in one geography we're working in, they have dozens of importers. And so what they're trying to do on that side is get a common way of paying invoices for this one New Zealand exporter. And so we help facilitate those kinds of things. I'd push back a little bit and say that, are Asian markets traditionally resistant to change? I'd say, no, they're probably reacting to the environment around them, and none of this is easy. The third thing that we do is we work through our customers. So in that example, we have an exporter might be connected to 5 importers. So we work through that exporter and we support them in their digital discussion with those 5 importers, just to help them understand and position how dealing on a platform, or running the process of trade on a platform, has advantages on both sides. And then on the import side, as I mentioned before, we were able to connect to importers via other platforms. Maybe it's Alibaba, maybe it's something like MasterCard. Again, trying to work through that organization and branch out to try and get buy-in on both sides. And I think that's the thing about digital trade, is that it's 2 sides of the same coin, but you've really got to look at both sides. If you're not paying it equal attention or thereabouts, then you're never going to get to digital trade. What you're going to get to is digital exporting or digital importing. But that means the whole system falls back to the lowest common denominator as paper. And so it really is about making sure that that data is able to be shared and used on both ends.
And I mean, that's really, that's really interesting. And that obviously you can't, we certainly, Alibaba as a big global company, and we're doing a lot with China, we get asked about geopolitics, and I give a very similar answer to Adrian, is we certainly, it's not our role to tell any government what to do, and that I think goes the same for New Zealand companies. Probably don't get very far trying to tell the New Zealand government what to do as well. So you've just kind of got to roll with that, and sure, there are things, I suppose, people can join industry groups and so on, and collaboration, and try to work with government, but you've just got to take advantage of that. I guess that one observation would be that countries that adopt digital tools and make it easier for people to trade are going to become more competitive. So the laggards, if they're laggards, they're going to find like, well, actually, we're making it difficult. People are starting to trade with these other countries, and that's not good for our businesses. It's not good for our consumers. It's not good for our input costs of our food or whatever it is. So I suspect you'll see countries do compete and collaborate with each other as well. So, I think if you can go with the countries that are leaders in so many areas, and we work across governments, be it regulation, sometimes we'll see that a consumer safety regulation is put in place in one country, and then we'll see something very similar emerge in another. Sadly, they then will interpret something to be slightly different. And back to one of the earlier forms, they'll want their own form for that, but often they're kind of based on the same principles. So I think you'll see that digitization, countries will learn from each other and maybe copy each other a little bit as well. Alvin, so I think Adrian just provided an example. We've got a few more minutes. Maybe, do you want to provide an example of how you've seen some companies transform when they've actually, they've gotten everything we've talked about, the challenges, they've understood it, they've spent the time, and then what happens, What's an example of how that's transformed their business?
Yeah, and we can see the companies on the platform, actually, some of them, they adapt quite well, and they start from beginning, and the learning process is going very smoothly, and everything will work with them, actually make the result come back to them in the export field. So, for example, we do have a company and trying to export to a new market and Southeast Asia companies. And the challenge is the same facing, and just like any company is facing, the supply chain, the compliance, the regulations from the other end, and also try to combine with the regulation within, in New Zealand, trying to export. So we'll work with customers to identify the issue step by step. It's quite important to work with your customers. Collaboration and the communication is quite critical. So we work with them and step by step, and they're trying to fix the issue one by one. And finally, they actually be able to fulfill the buyer's demand at the other countries at the other end, and gradually form up a new distribution channels throughout this leads. So this is a very actually practical, the case studies that the company is using Alibaba.coms, and there's a different types of the requirement from the companies. Some sophisticated exporters, they more focus on the data, they more focus on the regulations, compliance side, they more focus on the brand awareness globally. And this for small to medium sized enterprise, they probably more looking for the trade opportunities. That's where you previously mentioned that there's digital tools called IFQ Market going to help them to find the real orders, and to find the real trade opportunities within the platform. So depending on the customer and requirements and then what their goal is in the export, so we can actually tailor some sort of solution to help them on it.
Great, that's really cool. Paul, any examples you want to maybe give of any companies you've worked with? Without, you don't have to name the companies, but just general sort of areas where they've benefited.
Oh, I think in general, we're just trying to make things as simple as possible and as digitally enabled as possible. It can be quite hard, turning a big ship around in a small harbour sometimes. But we, as I mentioned before, we certainly look into the fintech, as an answer. I mean, the fintech industry in New Zealand is just going nuts, and there's some great technology out there that we can utilise, and so we're looking into that quite deeply. The market failure is global trade. It's a market, it's a failure because it's so heavily document dependent, so heavily paper dependent. So we have to work to fix that. Adrian and I sit on a working group on digital trades, and it talks to government and business.
Did we just lose? I think we just lost Paul. No, Paul, we lost you for a second. The digital trade group talks to government and business. So start again from there, where I lost you. I don't know if
I think that was pretty much that was it. But that's just so important because we've got to get all those settings right to enable trade from a global perspective. And many people aren't using digital trades because they can't get access to it. So there's an access perspective, there's a data perspective, there's all those kind of things. But the most exciting thing for us is integrating with a company like TradeWindow. They've got a great solution, and we're trying to integrate our solutions with them to give a full integrated platform sharing data that supports exporters. So that's what we're looking for.
I'm just looking at my clock, and we're basically out of time. We could keep talking about this topic with you guys for a lot longer because there's so much to share. But I thought I would wrap up with a few points. But before I do that, is there anything else that any of you would like to add as a final thought before I do a bit of a wrap up and a thank you? Nope. Okay, great. So I mean, I guess when I'm just thinking about what I've taken away from today, and I've taken away lots of things that I will certainly think about, and when I talk to my clients, but one of them is we can't stop the increasing complexity of data that's going to be required. You can be an ostrich and dig your head in the sand, but that's not going to go away. And you've seen so many examples from all our panelists today on the areas where that's going to happen. So the way I look at this is the digital tools allow you to turn that into your advantage, turn that data into an opportunity and a tool rather than an obstacle or a threat. Whether it's Adrian's example of how data can help you make clearer, better customs clearances. Paul talked about how you need data for ESG, but actually that can become a competitive advantage because if you have the data, you can then show that you are a really clean product that's grown from a sustainable farm, and you can actually demonstrate that instantly through the data. And then we've got blockchain security, and Alvin has also talked about, once you get into that mindset of collaboration and data sharing, things become much more efficient. So I think that data complexity is there. It's not going to get any better. It's probably going to get worse. Well, worse, there's going to be more. So use the tools that are going to help you turn that to your advantage. The second is, we've talked about collaboration. Lots of ways we've heard about collaboration with customers. We've talked about a few times, I think, Paul, you've mentioned working with TradeWindow. We're certainly working with all the people here on different ideas to collaborate. Digitization, I think, in many ways makes that easier, because we can do that across borders. We can share information in real time. And Alvin, certainly you've talked about that as well, that people can communicate with their customers all over the world instead of, I guess, having to travel to a trade show. And the third, and finishing on a really positive note, is, this is going to help you grow and scale your business. I think, Adrian, you made the point that it was really around, if you really want to scale and grow at the pace that companies hopefully want to grow, it's going to be very difficult without embracing digital tools, and trade is no different. So I think this is a really positive story. The great opportunities in New Zealand, great companies to work with. 3 of them are represented here. So, I would like to thank our panelists and the companies they represent and work with and work for. So Adrian from TradeWindow, thank you. It's great to work with TradeWindow and explore some exciting projects that we're working on with you. Thank you for your support for today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Paul, likewise, we've worked together in wearing various hats over the years, and really appreciate you joining us today. And I know you're very busy in sharing your time as well.
Right, thanks.
And Alvin, obviously our key partner for Alibaba.com rollout. We can't do it without partnerships. Go back to that topic of collaboration. We might be a huge company with hundreds of thousands of employees, but if we don't collaborate with partners, we don't get anywhere either. And we work with our partners, and without our customers and our partners, we don't achieve anything for our direct customers either. And last but certainly not least, we've got Alison and Kit here. You probably can't see them because I think they're in the background, but they have been very, very helpful. If they want to turn on their cameras, feel free to, but otherwise I'll just thank you. Alison from TradeWindow has been extremely supportive in actually making sure we all get this stuff done and reminding us to do things right up to the last minute. So thank you, Alison, with getting that slide up. And Kit, as always, our head of marketing for Australia, New Zealand, in getting such a great event together, and your team also working with getting all the registration pages up. So we're now 2 minutes over. Apologies, I've kept you 2 minutes too long. Australia is now going into a 2-day holiday, or at least Melbourne is. Not so New Zealand, but I think Monday is New Zealand's holiday, isn't it? The memorial. So well, everybody take care, and hope you've learned something today. And thank you everyone for your time, both the panelists and the attendees.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.